So let's get started. I am Gail Corvette and pleased to be the National President of Mortarboard for another day. Not even a day, like 1 o'clock, not that I'm counting when I get to pass the gavel to Katie Chick, but I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker for this session, Dr. Marlesa Roney, and I'd like to thank her for leading this advisor help desk session. And also helping us today is Cassandra Lucas, who is the alumni representative at large for a second. And then tomorrow she will become president-elect. But let me give you a little bit of background about our speaker today. Marlesa was initiated by the Torch chapter at the University of Kansas, where she is a professor of practice in KU's Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. An active contributor to Mortarboard, she is on the faculty of Mortarboard's signature advisor development program called LEAD, and she has been instrumental in the development of our strategic plan along with Cass Lucas. She, Cass, and Jane were like this brain trust triumvirate to wordsmith, push back to make sure we were really being transformational. And you'll hear more from Cass tomorrow at the business session about the 3-year strategic plan. We've been working on a 1-year plan at this point. But back to Marlesa and her fabulous work that she's done with Mortarboard. She is a charter member of the Mortarboard Alumni Association and the 1918 Society. But without further ado, let me welcome Dr. Marlesa Roney. Thank you for facilitating.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you, Gail and Cass. Thanks for being such a great chat minder. To all of you, it looks like right now we've got 14 participants, and so we are a small group. I anticipate that all of you can turn off your mute at will whenever you want to speak up. And this is intended to be, as the title says, a help desk, an opportunity for us to talk together about the year that's coming up. But I do want to share just a couple of screens to give you an idea of what I have in mind today. And so this first concept that we're a help desk, but 3 things that I want us to focus on. And my hope is that by coming together, not just for the conference, but also for this session, that we can continue to build some energy for the coming academic year. The funny thing for me personally is that I retired at the end of May. And so for the first time in 40 years, I'm not getting ramped up for the start of the fall semester, but I still am, because it's always such an awesome time. But I think building that energy is an important part of the preparation and thinking about our students coming back and what we can do to make this an amazing year for them. The other piece that I think we need to focus on, especially with recent news about the pandemic, is that we need to understand that things are going to be in flux again. And my hope when I first agreed to do this session was that we'd be waving bye-bye to the pandemic in the rearview mirror, and that things would be getting back to normal on our campuses. And they may a little bit, but I know here in the state of Kansas, both Kansas State and the University of Kansas have mask mandates again for all indoors. And I get a lot of Purdue things since I'm a Purdue alum. I kind of know what's going on there as well. But it's going to be interesting as advisors, I think, to anticipate what's going to happen with the pandemic and to help lead and guide our chapters through that, because our students, I think, are like the rest of us, they're worn out from this, and it's kind of yet one more wave. And so helping them navigate and helping them understand how to take some of these challenges and turn them into opportunities for the chapter. The last thing for this session is to really think about the essential role of advisors. And I am such a firm believer from my many years of working in higher education that when I see a strong student organization, I know there's an amazing advisor there, and it just goes hand in hand. And so for each of you, I want to say thank you. Thank you sincerely for everything you do. It's hard work, but it's such important work. And so that's another part of what we want to do today. We're going to, I always do roadmaps in my classes. I just can't get away from them just to say, here's what we're going to do. But we're going to start with 3 really quick polls, and appreciation to Barbara. She's got these set up when we're ready to rock and roll in a minute. And that will help all of us get to know who is in our room right now And then we'll do a quick review of what advisors do, but the main part of this is really discussion. And so you can use chat freely. You can also just speak up and say, here's something I'm looking at, or I have a question or a recommendation, or wherever you want to take that. And then the last thing we'll do is share a few of the resources that are available. And so that's where we're headed today. And so with that, Barbara, would you kick us off with our first poll? And it is, how long have you served as Mortar Board advisor? And so Barbara, are you able to share results on that? Okay. So we have the largest group are in kind of 2 to 4 years, but we have some folks, it's a first year. And so that's important for us to really understand. So several of you have a few years under your belt. Okay. And then our second poll is looking ahead to your chapter's plans for meetings, in person, virtually, maybe a combination, or you're not sure yet. And so, gosh, that's really interesting. No one at this point is saying there's going to be virtual meetings, so it's at least a combination. So fascinating. And then we have our last poll. It's about how you're feeling about the coming academic year. And we're spread out just a little bit more, although it is fun to see that the top grouping is enthusiastic, but we've got, pretty good, a bit concerned, and at least one person is a little bit worried. And so I appreciate all of your participation in the polls, and again, kind of helps me understand where we can go from here. As I said, I wanted to do a really, really quick review over primary advisor roles. And Gail had mentioned earlier that LEAD is one of the advisor certificate programs that Mortar Board offers. And a little bit later, I'll give you a chance to provide some input. We're hoping to provide LEAD this September, so just in another month or so. And these are some of the things that we really focus on. And my background is in working with students and looking at the research that helps us understand how students are successful. Many of you probably have at least a master's degree in higher education administration. You know the literature as well as I do, but it's this whole concept of challenging and supporting students. And the one piece that we really add for Mortar Board advisors is to honor those students as well, and to always keep in mind that, in fact, they are part of an honor society. But if we look at the primary advisor roles, we know that students change from year to year. That's one of the really awesome things about being an advisor, and one of the worst things about being an advisor. I've had tears in my eyes when students are ready to graduate, and then the next group comes in and I'm happy again. But you are the glue, because there's this transition. And so you're the one who can say, here's where the resources are, here's how we do this. And it's not to say we've always done it that way and we'll continue to do it that way, but here's a resource, and be that glue. The other things are to really create opportunities to honor our students, help them know that they're special members of our campus communities, help them enjoy what they're doing in their last year or two being at a university. But there are other two important pieces here, and that has to do with challenging our students. And I always laugh a little bit because, Mortar Board students are amazing, and yet at the same time, they're still students, they're still learning. And I firmly believe that as advisors, one of the things we need to do is to continue to teach continue to challenge. And it can come in forms like if someone would miss a deadline, it's being understanding, but at the same time helping them understand that in the world around them, that deadlines can be pretty important, not always, but teach them that it's an opportunity to be better organized, to figure out how to meet things like that. Or if there's a challenge in terms of leadership, that there's a difficult member or a difficult situation on campus, to take that opportunity to help them figure it out. And so advisors, I believe, very much are teachers, and they challenge students and help students. And then the support part and the cheering part, and that it comes pretty naturally to most people who are advisors, but it's making sure that we also, in addition to that support and cheer, include the honor and challenge along the way. So those are kind of the quick summary items I would provide in thinking about what the primary advisor roles are. And then, as I said, I do want us quickly to move on into discussion and to think about what are some of the questions that are on your mind. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen right now so that we can all see each other. And Cass, I'm going to turn to you to see if we've had any questions come in yet on some topics or questions or challenges that we want to focus on.
We have not had any questions yet, but people should feel free to raise their hands, write them in the chat, or again, I think as we're a small group, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, and I think, Barbara, just a heads up to you, I don't think we'll do breakout rooms. I think we'll stay as a group because I think we can all see each other pretty well. So some of you mentioned that you're a little bit worried about the coming year, and I'm an optimist by nature, so I hate to focus on the worries, but this is a help desk. We focus on worries here. So what are some of the worries that you are thinking about as the school year approaches?
I'm happy to kind of break the ice here.
Thank you, Margie.
I was one of the worried, very excited, but worried, one, about just concerns from students being comfortable. Purdue is not requiring vaccinations, and there's really no way for students to know who's vaccinated and who's not vaccinated. So I think one of my concerns is just how can we make our students feel safe with that, without that secure of knowing what kind of space they're entering in. We do have a mask requirement, but specifically we're looking at things like a retreat and what does that look like if they wanted to do it overnight. Things that kind of break my heart to say, hey, maybe we don't want to do that. So that's one of my worries. And then I think the other one is really, I've seen last year, we were lucky enough, sorry, my 5-year-old's in the background. We were lucky enough to have a really dedicated chapter, and engagement was really great for us last year, which was a very positive during COVID. But I've seen a shift just this summer of students really not being responsive and really being unengaged. And this is just an observation, but I'm a little concerned because I know we've had this conversation with staff of, during COVID, we really realized the priorities. And sometimes, family is, higher up there than it used to be for, those of us that are very dedicated to our job and kind of put priorities in check. And I'm also wondering if students have kind of done that, especially our mortar board students that we know are involved in several different things. And maybe mortar board isn't the top of their priority list, and just some concerns about engagement.
Thank you, Margie. And you can use your reaction button, and if any of you are feeling the same way, if you can give a thumbs up on that, and that will help us see if others are sharing those concerns, and at least a couple of people are.
I'll speak to that also.
Thank you.
So once again, everything last year was virtual, and I live in Texas, and if you've been following the nation, you'll know that our governor, we cannot require vaccinations. We can't even ask if students are vaccinated. There's no mask mandate. We're not allowed to mask up. So it's a bit like Purdue, except that our students will not be masked. And so we have no idea who's been vaccinated and who hasn't. So in-person meetings A number of our students just say they won't do it because they are afraid that, you know, there could be people who will be spreading COVID. And so it makes it very tenuous for the group in terms of knowing, you know, how to conduct meetings, who's going to be there, how that's all going to work. And so we have a very, very spirited group of students this year. They're wonderful, they're excellent, but they're struggling with how, you know, concern for safety versus, you know, just concern for trying to keep the organization as enthusiastic as it has been. So it's an interesting time. And as I've told our students, this is probably the most difficult mortarboard year. Hopefully the pandemic will be over by next year, but it's the most difficult year where we've seen, at least in my 20+ years of being an advisor. So, so I can very much appreciate what Margie is saying.
Thank you, Dominic. I appreciate your additional comments. Others on the topic of sort of safety, well-being. So a few of you gave a thumbs up on that. So let's take, and Lisa, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was
Please.
just going to say that last year we had some confusion as things transitioned, and our campus does a large public event every October that's mortarboard sponsored and coordinated across student clubs and organizations. And that event had to be canceled. Some members who were also part of student government who were in mortarboard tried to kind of do a bit of an end run and still try to do an in-person event. And that created some conflict within the mortarboard group, that people would step outside that were in dual capacities to try to do something that was normally a mortarboard branded thing. So I think really clear communication and you know, all being kind of on the same page is going to be real important. And then the last thing I would say is our group last year had planned some awesome events, and they were just really disheartened by having to cancel all those things that they thought they were going to be able to do. And this year, you know, I hope we don't have to go through that emotional roller coaster again. I don't think it hurt our recruiting and membership for this year, which is the good news. But I do think there could be a long-term effect that would be, you know, negative if we continue to kind of go through the cycle planning. So I'm wondering if anybody has ideas about maybe making a mixture of virtual and in-person things so that if something's got canceled, the original plans would still incorporate some things that didn't get canceled. I don't know. I'm open to people's ideas on that.
Yeah, and I wanted to sort of follow up on that in the sense that last year, almost everyone in the country was virtual. And so mortarboard was virtual. So initiation, induction, and all that sort of stuff was membership selection were all virtual. So a lot of the students, and I'm seeing this a lot at this conference, a lot of students are coming into this year a lot less better prepared than they have been at other times because they haven't had the person-to-person sort of transfer of power, if you will, that I've seen in other years. And so they're coming in a little bit uncertain themselves exactly what is their role, what's their position, how can they do things. Then on top of that, you've got this hybridization or hybridity, I guess, which is definitely going to happen. I mean, as the Delta variant keeps waging on, we have to make decisions, and we're going to have to keep doing that. And I very much sympathize with Lisa in terms of how do you, it's not like how do you do an all online event. We've all had that experience. This year, it's how do you do a mixed event? And that's much harder in terms of engagement.
It is very, very challenging. No question about that. Yes. So I think one of the things that Lisa said, she offered several sort of comments that lead us in directions of solutions, and appreciate that. But this whole concept of clear communication. And I think if just for a moment we allow ourselves to think about the safety and well-being of students right now, because that is something that several of you said that you know is a concern for students, that In many of our states, in the state of Kansas, it's very similar to Texas. That there's no requirement for a vaccination and you can't ask, and there's no vaccine passport. And I think that that's probably more the rule than it is the exception on our campuses right now. And so trying to figure out for your chapter, and I phrase it that way because it's not a one size fits all, but it's thinking about how you as an advisor can work with your chapter leadership to solicit the input from members to figure out what is of concern to them. And I think it's that whole concept of clear communication. It would be tempting for me to say, oh, I'm so tired of all this, let's just sort of throw it in the background and charge full speed ahead. But I think enough of you are saying that this is a worry for your students, that it would be really important before the semester starts or as the semester is starting to really be thoughtful, if you haven't yet, in soliciting input on what students are concerned about and what you can do to help them. It could be that Mortar Board could establish its own set of expectations for members in terms of, do we wear masks? Do we social distance? And it's perfectly fine to do that. There's no institution that has rules that say that you can't do that. But it can be the group coming together and say, I know our partner and I will look at each other when we're, in the last week, it's kind of like, well, are you going to mask up when we go into Menards or not? And it's kind of like, well, yeah, I am. And so it becomes more of that individual decision. And I think as a group, trying to figure out those, if you will, the rules of the road, at least for the first month or so, and then check in with people, check in again and see what's going on. The other piece, and I'm jumping ahead just a little bit as we think about resources that are available. One of the key things to keep in mind for all of you is that you are not alone in this. And my hope is that most of you have a team of advisors, although I know that some of you are alone as advisors, but there are other advisors of organizations on your campus. And so if you don't have other Mortar Board advisors, make sure that you connect with an advisor for another student organization. An honor society would be awesome. And then also acquaint yourself with some of the campus resources that are available. One of the key issues that I think all of us will deal with will continue to be mental health issues. And those have been becoming more a part of our everyday conversations over the past few years. If you're like me and you've been watching the Olympics, mental health has taken a new front row at the Olympics in helping us really think about what young people and talented people are dealing with. And so my encouragement would also be to acquaint yourself with the resources available on your campus to help you help your students navigate through different mental health issues that will come up. And especially for Mortar Board members, many people are getting ready to graduate into a really weird unknown world. There's been this lack of physical connection with people. And so that might be something to work with your officers on as you plan the year, to think about how you can navigate the resources on campus, how you can use those to help members really think about the mental health challenges and issues that they are experiencing or that other people are experiencing around them. So the clear communication, trying to make sure that you work with your members to know what their desires are in terms of how they want to deal with masks, no masks, social distancing. And then I kind of think about this whole thing. There are events and there are meetings, and I'm going to try and separate those into two categories. And I think meetings can be a little bit easier to offer both in person and virtual. Although most of the research shows that it's still really hard because you've got a screen over here that you're dealing with and people over here, and it can be really, really distracting. But I think if you are able to offer both in-person and virtual, if your chapter members want that, that can be a good approach, at least as the semester starts and we get a little bit more experience with Delta and anything else that's going to pop up in terms of the pandemic. For events, I hear some of you saying that, part of the sorrow of last year was planning things and then having to cancel or not being able to do things that have been a part of the regular tradition of Mortar Board. And so, again, I go back to what Lisa said in terms of clear communication, talking it through with your leaders, your chapter officers, and trying to figure out what they want to try, maybe try small. And again, always have a plan B, which Mortar Boards are good at. but making sure that we focus even a little bit more on the Plan B options this year. So that's a whole lot, I think, that you're focusing on. And I appreciate the fact that you're saying that the safety, well-being, comfort level of your chapter members is foremost in your minds right now for a lot of you. And I think working with your chapter officers to kind of figure out a game plan is going to be one of the best strategies, that clear communication that Lisa mentioned. Another topic that came up, and Margie, I think I have your name by this, but it's the whole concept of priorities right now. And the pandemic, I think for many of us has helped us kind of step back and say, what's really important in life? And it may be that for some members of Mortarboard, that Mortarboard will no longer be a priority. And at least that's, Margie, what I think I was hearing you say, that they might have come in gung-ho and now they're going, the way the world is right now, this is way down on my priority list. So one of the strategies that you might think about as an advisor is to really better understand the priorities of your students, not just your officers, but really the members of your chapter. And then try to see if you can build in some strategies in your Mortarboard programming that will align with what your student members' priorities are. So if they're more worried this year than ever about employment at the end of the year, which at least I think for me might be one of those things I might be a little bit more worried about, then your programming could be more centered on resources on campus that focus on job search kinds of things, or graduate and professional school. If priority is more friendships and connecting with family members, then really shifting programming to think more about those kinds of topics. So I think the strategy to consider is understanding first, what are the priorities, what's important to your members this year, because it might be a little bit different than years past, and then considering ways that you might be able to tweak and shift so that the programming of your chapter focuses more on those priorities. And then as a result, Mortarboard is going to be a little bit higher priority as well. And so that can be one of those win-wins. So that's, I think I appreciate the worries and concerns that have been expressed, and I really appreciate all of the ideas that you all have generated to help us move forward. We can come back to these topics, but let's see if there's some other things, other issues, topics, concerns, worries that you want to bring to the attention of the group.
You raised an interesting point about maybe, and it caused me to think about maybe putting a mental health questionnaire together, which like we could give out to our members, you know, at the first meeting, because we've had some personal experience in our chapter with members committing suicide. In fact, years ago, one of our, the student representative, Chris Shulman, committed suicide. So we're putting a scholarship together in his honor. But the point is that there are a lot of members who really won't reach out unless they're probed or questioned about it. But once they are, then you know, we should be able to think about ways to reach out to them and also encourage them to get help, or if it's just needing community or family, Mortarboard could potentially, members could be that for them. So the question is, I'm not a mental health expert. I don't know what questions would be good to ask. I mean, I'm sure there must be some resources out there so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. Do you have any thoughts?
Other folks, feel free, please, to speak up. One of the things I would do, many of our campuses, if they don't have an on-campus counseling center, there's a liaison with a community-based counseling center. And so I think I would identify those resources and then work with them to develop some type, you could even have a program based on that, that would include some type of an assessment. And I think, you know, Dominic, I appreciate the direction you're going. The key, I think, is making sure that as advisors, you know, that it doesn't all fall on your shoulders, that it's important to find those people who are the licensed professionals, and to make sure that you've got those linkages, that you know about those linkages in advance as you do this. But I would reach out to your mental health centers on campus. And again, for some campuses, there's a liaison with the community based practice. And so knowing who those individuals are and maybe including them in some of the programming as you move forward could be very helpful. But again, my encouragement is just please, as an advisor, you can start those conversations, but then understand when it's important to refer to the person who really does have that training. It's a lot to shoulder for someone, anyone, even if you have the training, but especially if you don't have the training. So thanks, Dominic.
I would just add to that, in my day job, I'm the Dean of our Career Center. And so you're right, people will be super concerned about their plans after graduation. And I know that your career centers on your campuses would love to come and talk to your members about the services and support that they can receive and how to start planning early for an uncertain marketplace.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, and a lot of departments on campus are just so eager to be able to share their resources, and we'll come and do presentations. We'll work one-on-one with students. So Lisa, thanks for reminding us that that's an outstanding resource to tap.
Shameless plug for career services.
Well received, well received. What are some other topics we've got? Oh my gosh, time always flies on short sessions like this. But we've got about another 7 minutes or so we can tackle at least one other topic. Well, let me ask you, as advisors, do you have the support you need? And if, I'm not going to have all of you jump on chat and say yes, no, maybe, I don't know, but it's a question I encourage you to ponder as the academic year starts. We've been talking about how our students have been through uncertainty and challenges, and, we're all included in this. We've been through the most interesting, challenging, frustrating. There's so many words that we can use for the past year and a half. And then at least, as I said before, to me, it was just like we're just kind of getting ready to move forward. And all of a sudden we put the brakes on again. And so my encouragement is to make sure that, again, if you have an advising team, which I hope you do, if you don't, this would be a great year to tap someone else on campus and get them involved with mortarboard. But make sure that you have the support you need to provide assistance to your students, and use those resources that are on campus. If you aren't familiar with campus resources right now, if you're new to your position or relatively new, at least look online and try and find out like where your student involvement center is, how you can get connected with some of the resources that are on campus. Many of your campuses will have a Dean of Students office or a Vice President for Student Services, Student Affairs. That's a great place to start. But just to make sure that, again, that you've got support around you so that you can do your best job as an advisor as you're supporting students through the coming year. Because again, we've all been through a lot of challenges. So, taking care of yourself to make sure you can take care of your students is a really important strategy.
I think what you said is very important in the sense that if we don't model self-care, then how do we expect our students to do it?
Absolutely. Well, keep thinking about things. And while you're doing that, I'm going to share just a couple more slides here. And so, again, one of the things I want us to think about are advisor resources. Mortarboard has a number of these resources. And Cass, can you help me figure out how to push these out to folks? Okay, thank you. But there's an advisor handbook on the website and then a resource page. The other thing that for those of you who haven't participated in LEAD, the Leadership Excellence and Advisor Education Certificate Program, that would be something that, again, we're hoping to do again in September. We've also been having some conversations about what we affectionately call LEAD 2, which would be kind of the next iteration and extended discussions. And I'm going to give you a link in just a minute to let you provide some input for the September session. But that last bullet point is a really important one, and those are the local campus resources as well. So Mortarboard can help you with the Mortarboard parts of the equation, but all of us need to know and understand what some of those resources are available. And again, given the world that we're in right now, it's understanding those mental health resources that are available, but also understanding the resources that are available to you as an advisor. Long ago, when I was an advisor at Purdue, we had an advisors organization, and we would actually get together for lunch about once a month and just kind of talk things through. And it could have been, several hundred people, and it was like just a small core group of people. But that's something that, if there's in-person dining, you can do that. And if not, maybe set up a Zoom meeting and just talk with some other advisors on campus or some folks that you enjoy working with. But understand what your campus resources are and use those fully. Those are some of the important pieces and resources. So the input for the session, there's a jot form that's out there. And again, Cass, I'm kind of looking at you. Can we push this out in some way or send it out afterwards? But this is an opportunity to provide some input on programming for a LEAD session. And again, it might be LEAD Part 2 for any of you who have already participated. But this is an opportunity to help us know, and I say us because I hope that I am a part of being able to lead some of the conversations with advisors again. But it's important for us to know what kinds of topics and challenges and opportunities you're interested in learning more about. And then finally, a couple of tips that I wanted to share, just 4 of these. And as we look at this coming academic year, and it gets back, I think, to what Margie was saying in terms of priorities and helping our students really figure out what the big picture is for the year, and then helping them focus on that and making sure that, maybe we've always said Mortarboard is 1, 2, 3. Maybe this year Mortarboard is XYZ instead of 1, 2, 3. And it can be that opportunity to shift the focus a little bit, but make sure it's the capstone experience for this particular class, but helping those students really focus on the big picture. Some of you mentioned that you'll be meeting virtually part of time or using technology. The good thing is, a year and a half into this, we're all so much better with technology now, but the key is using it strategically. And figuring out, if a student needs to hop on into a meeting virtually, that you've got that set up and you can do that. And our students are really good, not just pretty good, really good with this stuff now too. But I just encourage you to think about how you can use technology, maybe to take that event that you've always done and tweak it just a little bit, so that regardless of the pandemic this fall or the next spring, that there's still an opportunity for students to be able to do some of the things that they thought they would be able to do in Mortarboard. We've been talking quite a bit in this session about member needs. And so again, just being attentive and using resources and remembering to refer and not shouldering all those responsibilities yourself. Students will come to you with cares and concerns, and that's really important that they can do that. Sometimes all they need is someone to listen to them, but sometimes they need that extra level of assistance and professional help. And so make sure that you listen carefully and know when it's time to refer on. And then finally, just repeat again to use your resources from Mortarboard. The Mortarboard National Office is always willing to work with you individually as advisors. Just get in touch and say, hey, I've got a question, I've got a situation here, I need some help with this. And also share your successes and the things that are really going well for you. And one more plug to use your local campus resources as well. As I mentioned earlier, effective organizations are all about effective advisors. And so as you start this academic year, please know that what you do truly makes a difference in the lives of your students, my hope for each of you is that it also will make a difference in your life. For me, working with students is one of the most amazing experiences. And that's my sadness in retiring this year, is that I've got to kind of figure out a new way to make sure that I feel like I'm helping make a difference in the world around me. So those are some tips that I wanted to share, and I am looking at the clock here and just seeing, is there maybe one more quick question that anyone has? Dominic does.
It's not so much a question as it is a comment. So we have a number of advisors here, and there are over 200 advisors around the country, certainly, as there are chapters. Has there any thought been given to, for example, having a group me or some ways for advisors to interact with other advisors during the year? Because you talked about how important it is maybe to have a team of advisors at a university. We've got a huge team of advisors here, and it seems like it'd be kind of a neat thing to get advisors talking to each other. How did you do this on your campus? Can you do this? What's going on there? It would allow us to at least know that we're not alone, outside of our universities.
Yes, so here's a little spoiler alert for the business session tomorrow. You will hear a presentation from our student representatives. We've done a pilot all year about using Slack for that kind of thing, and we are ready to roll it out mortarboard wide. And there'll be a channel for advisors so you can share advice and that kind of thing and support.
I figured you'd be on top of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. The other thing, and Gail mentioned earlier that, Cass and I've been working with many other people with the strategic plan, and I've been absolutely thrilled to know that one of the key bullet areas on that strategic plan has to do with advisors and advising support. And so I think the Slack channel is going to be one of many new tools and support mechanisms that will be coming up in the very near future to enable advisors to get together, to share ideas, to share challenges, share those successes. And so I think there's a lot of really good things coming down the line for advisors. So any other quick comments as we wrap things up today? Thank you for being here.
I would love to thank you and thank everyone for their participation in this session.